public think about raising transportation revenues? To what extent are they willing to pay more? And by the way, I discovered that the gas tax is a source of all kinds of wonderful cartoons. Who would have thought? But I'm going to talk today particularly about public opinion about the gas tax because it's still with us. It isn't dead yet. And mileage fees, which seem likely to be the next big thing that will replace the gas tax. So this cartoon shows you the gas tax, which is, expired. The idea being cars are more fuel efficient. We don't raise the rates very often. So that's the problem there. And people in the transportation profession have been saying for a long time, well, we need more money, we need to raise additional revenues. And for the most part, that became something that our legislators did in their roles, for example, as a state senator or in the state house. And the perception was that our legislators were not willing, that they found nothing scarier than the idea of raising the gas tax. I would argue in California, we have evidence that our legislators have taken a different approach, for which I'm very grateful, and they have taken the very public step of raising gas tax rates with SB1. But obviously, they need some reassurance that this is reflecting the will of the people, especially if we move forward to think about doing more in the future. So I'm going to run through some evidence that I have assembled over the years, both from my own research and then also from looking at other people's surveys and focus groups and other things to think about what the public is willing perhaps to pay in terms of raising the gas tax rate or introducing a new mileage fee. And I'll start with the gas tax. So I have done 10 annual surveys over the years asking the public, would you be willing to pay more in federal transportation revenues? And we asked about a variety of things. These were the kind of random digit dial phone surveys where somebody interrupts you at an inconvenient time and asks for just a few minutes of your time. This was another gas tax cartoon. Somebody's being called to ask them about whether they would support the gas tax, and they're busy and a lovely pothole. But anyway, so for each of our surveys, we had 1,200 or 1,500 people respond, and we asked them, among other things, about 7 different variations on raising the federal gas tax by 10 cents per gallon. And so what did we find? Would the public support this 10-cent increase? And the answer is yes, but only certain variations, only some options. And so let me walk you through what I mean. So we asked everybody about what I'm going to call the base case gas tax increase, which was just, would you support raising the gas tax by 10 cents per gallon for transportation? So no other information given to people. And that is where we got, in this last year, it was 34% support. That's that blue section, the bottom part of those bars. But then we went on and we asked them about all kinds of variations. It was still always going to be that same 10 cents per gallon increase. But we asked, well, what about if we spread that out over 5 years, for example? And so what's interesting to me are these purple bars. So these are the additional support we got compared to just the base case when we asked about these variations. So just telling people you would introduce this increase over 5 years instead of all at once, you got an additional 20 percentage points of people saying, yes, I could support that. We also had a couple of kind of environmental options. One, telling people the money would be dedicated for projects to reduce local air pollution. And the other case, we told people the money would be dedicated to projects to reduce the impact of our transportation system on global warming. And in both of those cases, we got an additional 25 or 26% of people saying, yes, I would support that gas. And then perhaps not, then the most popular variants we asked about were for safety and for maintenance. And in this case, not only are we over a majority, but I think this adds up to 72%, so almost 3/4 of people. And this is a supermajority at 66%. So not just you barely scrape by, but a clear majority of the population said they could support those gas taxes increases when the money is dedicated for some clear purpose that, you know, apparently people feel matters to them. We've been doing the same survey over the years. I've mentioned, sorry, this is actually 8 years of data, but the pattern hasn't changed too much. And so each of these clusters is one of those variants on the gas tax. And we start with the oldest data here and we move, and you'll see that, you know, it pretty much moves up. So there are things bounce around a little bit, but there seems to be across all these different variants a clear increase in the percentage of people willing to support a gas tax. So that was another key finding. We also looked at whether there were particular subgroups within the population who in general were more willing to support increasing the gas tax. And we sliced and diced into, you know, hundreds of categories. And one of the, to me, important findings is, for the most part, there's not all that much variation. You know, but there were a few groups that stood out as being particularly supportive of sort of any of these different variants on increasing the gas tax. One was younger people. And so it's interesting to think, is that a life stage where when you get middle-aged, you stop being supportive, or is that just a sort of change in the culture, and that these people, when they're 25 who support it now, are still going to support transportation funding when they're 50. We don't know for sure, but it is important that these young people, also if you were not a Republican, you are more likely to be supportive. But I will say that even majorities of Republicans in our surveys supported the maintenance and the gas tax increase for maintenance and for safety. So it's sort of a less stark political difference than you might expect, even though there was definitely a difference there. The other thing is, when we took the most popular taxes, so like the maintenance and safety ones, and the least popular one, just the base case gas tax, there was very little difference. So basically everybody hated or loved, more or less, zones. It was in the middle that you had more variation by different population groups. So we end with, I think this is my last gas tax cartoon. You know, I'm beginning to warm up to a small gas tax increase. Hopefully we don't have to have too many more bridges collapse. So let's turn to mileage fees. So here I'm going to be reflecting on information gathered from those same annual surveys I was just talking about, because we also asked a couple of mileage fee questions in those. But I also finished in 2016 a synthesis study where we collected every bit of information we could find that other researchers had done about opinions about mileage fees. And we ended up looking at 38 different surveys, 12 qualitative studies. These are mostly focus group projects. And then we collected media stories from 5 years, and we looked at 359 of those. So what did we find? Do people support the concept of a mileage fee? And by the way, this was asked 2 different ways. Some surveys basically just said, would you support a mileage fee? Whereas other surveys would specifically say, would you support replacing the gas tax with a mileage fee? And we find, by the way, pretty similar response rates in both variations. So I'm going to just talk about the first one, do you support a mileage fee? And the answer to those questions is usually no, perhaps not too surprising. However, again, there's more to the story than just that. The average support level across 33 different survey questions that asked about support for mileage fee was 24%, so low. That's my big red no. But the support did vary. It wasn't that low everywhere, and support ranged from 8% up to 50%. Now, we also looked more at the reasons why people were feeling the way they did. And so for those of you who think that a mileage fee is the way to go over time, there's a ray of hope, even if only on average 24% of people were supporting it in a lot of these surveys that we looked at. And now, as I said, I want to delve into some of the additional details. First of all, support seemed to be increasing over time. If we look at the whole group of surveys. We also had surveys from, at that point, 2 different pilot programs where people had been surveyed at the beginning when they had agreed to participate, and at the end, after they had, had their mileage tracked and paid these imaginary mileage fees. And in both cases, there was a very clear trend that more people were supported at the end of participating in the pilot than at the beginning. So one can extrapolate that and imagine that perhaps for the full population, if people started to experience it, they, in general, would have fewer concerns. We also found that media stories, those 359 stories from newspapers and such, were becoming gradually more positive over time. And then of the surveys that I had worked on that series, we found, and this for me was, again, what was important was the difference between 2 versions we asked about. So we asked about just a plain penny a mile gas tax, mileage tax. And then we asked about mileage tax where the average rate everybody pays is a penny per mile, but the specific rate you pay is based on how much pollution your vehicle emits. So I'm calling it a green mileage tax. And we jumped from 27% support for just the plain old mileage tax to 46% support if the rate was structured to account for how polluting your vehicle is.